Children with special educational needs are being let down by system-wide failings, according to a new report. New data released by The Key, which is a school support service, shows more than 82% of mainstream schools in England don't have enough funding for the 1.1 million students in need. The Department for Education says that key training will now form part of initial teacher training and that more money will be supplied for those with high needs. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue is Ed Archer. She's the Director of Campaigns at Ambitious About Autism, who's in Muswell Hill in North London for us this afternoon. And in Southampton is Richard Daniel Curtis, who's the founder of Root of It, an organisation that provides consultancy and training for schools, and he joins us via Skype. Welcome to both of you. Ed Archer, first of all, to you, what's your view on this issue? Do you feel that there's enough support in schools for children with special educational needs?
I think I really appreciated this report today, but I don't think it told us anything that we weren't expecting. Teachers have been telling us for years that they go into the classroom feeling unprepared by their training to teach the children in their classrooms, and no teacher trains to be able to do that. And certainly we hear from parents all the time that they feel like they have to fight to get their children's needs met, and obviously that's just not okay.
Well, Richard Curtis, your organisation does provide consultancy over training. So what's your experience? How much training are teachers currently getting to teach kids with these extra needs?
Not that much, very honestly. Our experience is that teachers come into the classroom as newly qualified teachers with very little experience, only a few hours of training in working with and supporting children with special educational needs. And part of the training that we provide for newly qualified teachers to teach them basic classroom management skills, for example, like behaviour in the classroom, or what's becoming increasingly important is supporting mental health and social and emotional difficulties in schools, because there are lots of people out there who don't understand that that's affecting children in our schools, and with the lack of funding for special needs support, then children are suffering.
And Richard, how hard is it to train teachers when special educational needs covers quite a broad spectrum, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where we see people start to go on different courses and gain different experience relating to the special educational needs that they're coming up against in their classroom that particular year. And so over the course of 5-10 years, they may only see certain types of special educational needs. So the moment that a child joins them with high functioning autism and they haven't encountered that before, they're likely to be unprepared for that, because the way that the schools work their funding is that they will only send people on courses that relate to what they're facing now.
So Ed Archer, clearly your specialism is in autism. To what extent would you say that a child who has autism, how could they be disadvantaged by teachers not being adequately prepared?
I think the thing is with autism is it's a really, really complex condition, and no two children with autism are the same. So I think that it's especially important that teachers are primed from the day that they enter a classroom, really, to understand the variety of different adjustments they can make to make life a little bit easier for an autistic child. As you know, we've been campaigning with NAS for quite a while on the Every Child campaign to ensure that every teacher steps into the classroom ready, and they've had those adjustments put into place so that they can understand that some children with autism have really, really high sensory sensitivity, and that simple things like turning down lights or lowering noise levels in classrooms can make a really, really massive difference. But that's just the start of it, really. For me, with knowing that 1 in 100 children has a diagnosis of autism, it's not a low likelihood that you as a teacher are going to come across a child with autism in your career. Statistically, it's incredibly unlikely that you won't. There's 33 kids in every class, so 1 in 3 classes you teach is going to have an autistic child in it. It's essential that you understand those children's needs and the types of adjustments that you can make. And that needs to be not just in initial teacher training, but actually in continuous professional development for everybody in the school. We've been doing some great work with the Autism Education Trust over the last couple of years, funded by the Department of Education, to train thousands of teachers in the real basics understanding of autism, but I also think there's opportunities there to have school leaders, people within the school who really understand children's needs in order to make the whole school environment more autism friendly. But yeah, I mean, and also what's good for autistic children tends to be good for most of the other children in the classroom as well, we find.
Well, that's a really interesting issue. And Richard, I don't know what your view is on this. To what extent can a child, whether they've got autism or some other special educational need, to what extent can they benefit from being in a mainstream school? And likewise, other pupils, how do they benefit by sharing their classroom with people with those extra needs?
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. And as a teacher myself, when I was still in the classroom, I had a very high opinion of making sure that actually I could include every child as much as I could in daily classroom life, because the skills that it teaches the whole class about empathy, about giving, about understanding, about allowing for different needs are absolutely life skills. As adults, we treat our friends differently. You know, we all have one friend who we can't say something to, or we have another friend who you have to phrase things in a particular way, for example. That is no different than teaching children how to cope with children with special and additional educational needs in the classroom and supporting them. I mean, I think personally for me, one of the big things that's coming out of today is the importance of ring fencing special educational needs funding for schools, so that it doesn't just get lost in the big staffing melting pot, but actually there's some allocated to this continuing professional development, this training that both of us today are saying is absolutely desired, absolutely needed.
Well, yes, and Ed Archer, the Department of Education has said, as we said in our introduction, they've talked about key training being part of initial teacher training, and they've also said more money will be supplied for those with high needs, is how they put it. And yet funding does seem to be the key issue, according to the survey. A large proportion of schools are complaining that resources is the real problem here. Would you agree that that's the issue?
I think it's complex, but I think resources are always an issue, yes. I think that that we spend a lot of time talking about how to divide the pie, and the reality is that the pie just isn't big enough. And I think that the resources conversation is a really hard one, because it's the resources conversation that makes that puts families at the opposite side of the fence to teachers when they don't need to be there. Because actually, teachers and parents both want the same thing. They want every child in that classroom to do really well. And I think putting schools in a position where they have to take decisions around how to use funding is not very helpful. I really agree with Richard around ring fencing keeps everybody safe. I think we're all really happy when we can see that we know that something's going to be provided for our children without question.
Well, Ed Archer and Richard Daniel Curtis, really interesting to talk to you here this afternoon. Thanks both for your time. Now, it's usually thought that a